Hello, my friend, and welcome back to Sleepy Shelf with Oliver. If you are hearing my voice, it means the day is finally over. The world outside may be rushing, but in here, time stands still. The storm is quite heavy tonight, isn't it? But you don't need to worry about the cold, the wind, or the endless thoughts trying to keep you awake. You are safe now, hidden away in this old Victorian study. The hearth is glowing, the heavy curtains are drawn, and I have a quiet tale waiting just for you. So, sink into your pillows, close your eyes, take a slow, deep breath, and let the heavy rain wash the world away. Part 1. The Gathering Storm and Setting the Scene. Settle in. Now, pull the covers just a little closer and let your shoulders fall all the way down until you feel the soft resistance of the mattress cradling you from below. That's it. There is nowhere you need to be tonight. No task left undone that cannot wait until morning. The world outside can carry on without you for a little while, and you have earned this. This quiet, this stillness, this particular kind of surrender that only comes in the last hours of a long and honest day. My name is Oliver, and I will be here with you tonight, every step of the way. Tonight, we are going somewhere very far from here. We are going back, a long way back, to a place that exists now only in memory and imagination, in the yellowed pages of old books, and the particular smell of a house that has stood through many winters. We are going to London, not the London of today, with its noise and its brightness and its endless hurrying. No, we are going to a London of long ago, to the final years of the 19th century, when the streets were lit by gaslight and the evening settled in early and deep, and when a man might spend an entire autumn night in his study without once feeling that he was missing anything at all. It is November. The year is 1893. The city has spent the whole of the day pulling its collar up against the cold. By afternoon, the sky had taken on that particular color, not quite gray, not quite violet, that Londoners of the time knew all too well. It was the color of a sky that had made a decision. The vendors on the Strand had watched it thoughtfully and begun covering their wares. The carriage drivers had clicked their tongues and urged their horses a little faster. The old women selling hot chestnuts from their iron braziers had exchanged glances and needed no words at all. Everyone understood. Tonight, it would rain. Tonight, it would rain heavily, and for a long time. But we are not outside. We are inside, and that is the whole of it. That is the very heart of everything I want you to feel tonight. The profound, almost physical pleasure of being inside, while something enormous gathers itself in the sky overhead. The room we are in is a study. It is on the first floor of a tall, narrow townhouse somewhere in Bloomsbury. One of those handsome Georgian terraces where the brick has long since darkened to a deep and satisfying brown, where the front steps are worn smooth by a century of boots, and where the windows look out through iron railings onto a quiet, tree-lined square. The square's elm trees have lost nearly all their leaves by now. A few last ones cling to the branches, pale and curled and reluctant, but the cobblestones below are thick with them, dark with damp, pressed flat against the stone, like letters sealed and forgotten. The study door is closed. Behind it, the rest of the house sighs and settles in the particular way that old houses do. A creak from the staircase, a distant murmur of pipes. Somewhere deep in the walls, the low and faraway sound of a coal scuttle being set down in the kitchen below. But these sounds reach us only faintly, softly, the way sounds do when they have traveled through plaster and wood and heavy doors and have spent most of themselves by the time they arrive. In here, the quiet is nearly complete. The study is not a large room, but it is a deeply comfortable one, in the way that rooms become comfortable only over many years of careful living. Every surface holds something that has been touched and handled and thought about. The writing desk, a large one, mahogany, its leather surface tooled in faded gold, stands before the window, though its chair is empty now, pushed back at a slight angle, as though its occupant has simply stepped out for a moment and will return. The inkwell is capped. A letter lies half finished on the blotter, the pen set beside it with the particular neatness of someone who means to come back. But the armchair by the fire, that is where we are. It is a deep chair, a chair of serious and committed softness, upholstered in a green that was once quite vivid and has since mellowed into something richer and more restful, the color of old moss, of riverbank shadows. The arms are worn at the edges where hands have rested 1,000 times. The cushions have shaped themselves over years and years into something very close to a human form, which means they receive you now with an almost uncanny attentiveness, as though they have been expecting you specifically. Beside the chair, a small table holds a cup of tea. It has been there long enough that the steam rising from it is very gentle now, barely a thread of silver in the warm air, curling and dissolving before it has gone more than a few inches upward. The tea is the color of amber, very dark, the sort of tea that has had time to think. A small spoon rests in the saucer. A single cube of sugar sits beside it, never used. The fireplace is directly opposite. The fire inside it is not a roaring thing. It has moved past that stage of the evening and settled into something more considered, a deep bed of orange and crimson coals beneath a modest flame that leans now one way, now another. As the draft shifts, it makes no great sound, only a low, occasional ticking, and now and then a small collapse of coal that sends a brief cascade of sparks upward into the flue, bright and gone in an instant, like a thought that arrives fully formed and then slips away before it can be caught. The mantelpiece above it is dark marble, and upon it a carriage clock whose ticking is almost imperceptible from the armchair, a small bronze figure of a stag, and 2 candlesticks, unlit, their wax cold and ivory. On either side of the fireplace, bookshelves reach from floor to ceiling. The books upon them are old friends. They are not arranged for show. They are arranged the way books arrange themselves when they are actually read, by association, by feeling, by the obscure logic of a mind that knew exactly why this volume wanted to stand beside that one. Their spines are every shade of brown and green and burgundy, some lettered in gold that has worn to a whisper, some with no lettering at all. And the smell, that particular smell, which is very nearly the smell of the room itself, old paper and leather, and the faint ghost of pipe tobacco that has seeped so completely into the curtains, and the plaster and the wood, that no amount of airing will ever entirely remove it, nor would anyone wish it to. Beneath that, the dry mineral warmth of the coal fire. Beneath that, something fainter still. Beeswax, perhaps, from the floor polish, or the faint sweetness of the applewood that was added to the grate earlier in the evening and has since burned away entirely, leaving only the memory of its scent drifting among the warmer ones. The curtains at the window are drawn, mostly, not entirely. There is a gap of perhaps 2 inches between them, where they fail to meet at the center. And through this gap, if you were to look, though there is no reason at all to move or turn or do anything but remain exactly as you are, you would see the glass of the window itself, and beyond it, the square, and beyond that, nothing but a darkness that is deepening by the minute. The curtains are heavy velvet. They are the color of dried mulberry, a deep reddish purple that drinks the firelight and gives almost none of it back. They are so thick that when you stand near them, you can feel the cold of the glass radiating from behind them. And yet here, in the chair, that cold is entirely theoretical. Here, there is only warmth. Somewhere very far away, further than the square, further than the street, perhaps as far as the river, a low sound moves through the evening air. A rumble, long and slow and enormous. Not sharp, not violent, the kind of sound that begins before you are quite certain you have heard it and ends after you have already begun to forget it. The sound of something immense shifting in the sky overhead as the very atmosphere of the city turns itself over and prepares. The carriage clock ticks. The fire breathes. And then, just as the last light in the square below fades to nothing, the first drops of rain arrive. Heavy, deliberate drops, each one landing against the thick glass of the study window with a sound like a fingertip pressing gently, asking to be let in. Part 2. The fire is lit and the rain begins in earnest. Stay where you are. There is no need to move, no need to do anything at all, except allow yourself to sink a little deeper into the chair, to feel the soft resistance of it giving way beneath you, degree by degree, the way the last of the evening's tension releases itself, not all at once, but gradually, like a long, slow exhale that you did not know you had been holding. The rain has started. Let that settle over you like a blanket. The rain has started, and it means what it has always meant, that the night has officially closed around this small, warm room, that the boundary between inside and outside has become something total and definitive, that whatever lies beyond these walls and these heavy velvet curtains is now entirely separate from us. We are in here. Everything else is out there. And the rain falls between those two worlds like a curtain of its own. Continuous, unbroken, absolute. Listen to it. In the very first moments, it is arriving in waves, not yet fully steady, still making up its mind about its own rhythm, the way rain does at the very beginning of a long night of rain. A flurry of drops against the glass, then a pause of perhaps 2 seconds, then more. More drops now, heavier ones, the kind that carry real weight, that strike the window not with a tap, but with a press, a fullness, a satisfying and complete sound that lands somewhere behind the sternum and stays there. Is the endless noise of the day refusing to fade? Step off the freezing windswept cliffs and let the heavy iron door of the lighthouse close firmly behind you. Leave the storm outside. Take a slow, deep breath. Fill your lungs with the comforting scent of burning driftwood, old leather, and a hint of sea salt. Listen to the muffled, rhythmic crash of the ocean against the ancient stone and the quiet crackle of the cast iron stove. This tower has stood strong for centuries. Nothing can reach you here. Just close your eyes and let the waves rock you to sleep. Part 1. The Storm and the Beacon. Close your eyes. Take a slow, deep breath. Let your body grow heavy. The path along the cliffs had no name on any map you had ever seen. It wound itself between the grass and the granite, between the high land and the place where the land simply stopped, where it gave way to the ocean, hundreds of feet below. On a clear afternoon, you might have walked it easily, taking note of the way the heather grew low and violet-colored against the pale stone, or how the gulls hung suspended in the updraft without so much as moving a single feather. But it was not a clear afternoon. It was the deep, churning middle of a night in late autumn, and the storm had been building for hours. You had been walking for a long time, long enough that the cold had moved past being something you felt and had become, instead, something you simply were, a cold thing, moving through a cold world, one slow step at a time. Your coat was soaked entirely through. You could feel it against your shoulders, against your arms, heavy as something pulled from the sea. The rain came sideways, the way it always does on a coastline in a true storm, not falling so much as thrown, carried by a wind that seemed to have no patience for anything that dared to stand upright in its path. The wind was loud. That is perhaps the gentlest way to put it. It was the kind of loud that lives below sound, that moves through you rather than around you. A deep, resonant howling that pressed against the eardrums and filled the chest. It came in great surging waves of noise. A roar, a lull, another roar, and beneath it, steady and enormous, was the voice of the ocean itself. You could hear the waves far below without seeing them, great walls of dark water, rising and collapsing against the cliff face, sending up bursts of white spray that the wind then caught and flung across the path in cold, stinging curtains of salt. Across the dark cliff top, 3 seconds, a pause, 3 seconds, you let your shoulders drop, you let your hands fall open at your sides. You breathed in the warm, still air of the lighthouse, and you felt, slowly, gently, without drama, the cold begin to leave you. Rest now. You are inside. You are warm. There is nowhere else to be tonight. Listen to the sound of the waves far below, muffled by the stone. Let the storm do what storms do, out there beyond the walls. You are safe. You are dry. You are still. The beam turns. The waves breathe. The lighthouse holds. On one side of the threshold, the howling, the cold, the roar, the salt, the dark, the endless motion of wind and water and chaos. On the other side, on this side, there was simply nothing. Not emptiness, but its opposite, completeness. The door swung shut behind you, and the storm became a distant sound. Then a memory of a sound, then barely a vibration, felt through the soles of your feet, coming up through the stone. The silence was enormous. It pressed against your ears the way silence only does when it follows a great noise, not an absence. A weight. The thick walls of the lighthouse, each stone perhaps 3 feet across, sealed out the wind as thoroughly as if it had never existed. You stood in a circular stone chamber, 6 feet across, the walls curving around you, and you breathed and breathed. The air was warm, not the sharp, stinging warmth of a fire being held up close to frozen hands, but something older and steadier, a warmth that had been accumulating in these walls for years, perhaps decades, the patient gathering of heat in stone that never quite lets it go. It smelled of things that had been here for a very long time. Oil and salt and iron and old wood, and something beneath all of it that was simply the smell of shelter, of a place that had been holding back the weather for 100 years without complaint. Above you, a stone staircase curved upward in a tight spiral, disappearing into the dim. Before you, a low archway opened into the cottage. But you stood still for a long moment, doing nothing at all. Your soaking coat dripped quietly onto the stone floor. The droplets made the only sound soft, irregular, patient. Outside, you could just barely hear the storm if you concentrated. A low murmur like something heard through earth, through distance. The lighthouse beam swung overhead. You felt the gentle shift of its light through the walls, or perhaps only imagined it, that slow, reliable pulse that had been pulling you here. Above it all, the beam continued its patient revolution, golden, slow, unwavering. You fixed your eyes on it and walked toward it. The headland leveled off at the top, and then the lighthouse was simply there, far larger than it had seemed from below, which is the nature of lighthouses seen up close. It rose from the rock in a single column of ancient granite, perfectly round, its stones darkened by generations of weather and salt and time. The tower itself disappeared upward into the fog, but you could see the glow of the lamp room high above, blurred and haloed by the mist, sending its great arm of light swinging out over the water, again and again and again. At the base of the tower, almost an afterthought, was the keeper's cottage, low, thick-walled, its small windows dark except for the faintest suggestion of amber warmth from deep within. And set into the base of the tower itself, facing away from the sea, was a door, an enormous, ancient door, oak by the look of it, though it was difficult to say in the darkness, black with age and weather, iron banded across its width with 3 great horizontal bars of dark metal. The iron itself knotted with old rust, the color of dried blood. The hinges were enormous, elaborate, the work of a blacksmith who had believed in permanence. A metal ring served as the handle, heavy enough that you needed both hands to turn and pull it. The storm pushed at your back as you reached for it. The door opened inward. You felt the resistance of its weight, and then, all at once, it gave, swinging away from you on hinges that groaned like something waking from a very long sleep. And you stepped through, and the world ended. Not literally, but that was how it felt. Your lips tasted of the sea. Everything tasted of the sea. The path turned and climbed and turned again. You kept walking. It was the light that stopped you. Not immediately. It came slowly, the way most important things do. First, there was a vague brightness at the edge of your vision, something paler than the surrounding dark. You almost dismissed it, but then it moved. A long, slow sweep of golden light, immensely wide, passing through the fog above you, like a hand drawing itself across a window. It lasted only a few seconds before it was gone, swallowed back into the gray. Then it returned. The same slow arc, the same deep, warm gold, extraordinary against the wet black of the sky, the kind of gold that seems to come from somewhere very old. Something burning with absolute patience. It swept through the fog, and for just a moment, it illuminated the path ahead of you, the cliff edge to the left, the churning silver white of the sea below, and there, high above, at the crest of the rocky headland, the outline of a tower, a lighthouse. You stood very still and watched it complete its arc, vanish, and return again. 3 seconds, a vanishing. 3 seconds again. Slow, steady, reliable as breathing. Something loosened in your chest that you had not known was tight. The path rose steeply toward the headland, and the wind fought you for every step of it. At times it came directly at you from the sea, a wall of force so total that you had to lean into it, pressing forward through the resistance, the way you might push through deep water. The rain lashed at your face. The salt spray came in cold, intermittent bursts. The grass on either side of the path bent nearly flat, trembling and whipping without pause. The traveler moved toward it, not quickly. There was something about the scene, the soft amber light, the melted halo, the scent of yeast and cinnamon still drifting, thickening now as each step forward brought more of it. That made hurrying feel wrong. This was not a moment to be rushed. This was a moment to be moved through slowly, the way you move through the last few pages of a story you don't want to end. There was a door, heavy, dark wood, old and dense, with iron fittings that had gone from black to a deep brownish gray through years of handling. A door that had known thousands of hands, thousands of cold evenings, thousands of moments just like this one. A door that knew its purpose. A door that waited. The traveler's hand found the iron handle, pressed it down, and the door swung open. The bell rang. Not loudly. Nothing here was loud. It was a low, round chime. A sound with weight to it. A sound that came from somewhere deep in the bell's iron throat and then settled into the air of the room like a stone settling into still water, sending ripples of resonance out in every direction before growing quiet, quieter still. But the sound of the bell was barely noticed because the warmth had arrived first. It arrived like a presence, like stepping into an embrace, like being met by something that had been waiting for you. It was not merely warm, it was sheltering the cold of the lane, the cold that had been pressing against collar and wrist and cheekbone for longer than felt quite natural, simply stopped, ceased, was replaced entirely, in a single step across the threshold, by air that was soft and full and alive with heat that pressed gently against the face and the back of the hands and the cold, stiffened shoulders like something tender. The traveler stood in the doorway, just stood. There are moments that the body recognizes before the mind does, moments of such simple and fundamental rightness that thought becomes briefly unnecessary. The body already knows. It has already exhaled. The shoulders have already dropped. The jaw has already unclenched. The chest has already begun to open. Slowly, the way a fist slowly uncurls when the thing it was holding is no longer needed. This was one of those moments. Behind the traveler, the door swung slowly shut. The lane, the snow, the cold, all of it was simply on the other side of a heavy door now. The night existed. Certainly, the frost was still out there, still gentle and still relentless, still laying its white certainty across the cobblestones and the window ledges and the long curved backs of the sleeping rooftops. But in here there was only warmth and the smell of bread beginning to be born and the deep, drowsy amber of the fire. Rest here a while. There is nowhere you need to be. The snow can fall as long as it likes. Part 2. The heart of the bakery. The room was larger than it had appeared from outside, or perhaps it only felt that way because of the warmth. The way warmth tends to expand a space, to make the walls feel generous and the ceiling feel high. to give even a modest room the quality of something vast and sheltering. Whatever the reason, the traveler stepped fully inside and found the world had quietly rearranged itself into something almost impossibly welcoming. It was a long room, low-beamed at the ceiling, where dark timber ran the width of the space in slow, even intervals, each one worn to a deep walnut color by decades of heat and wood smoke rising from below. The floor was stone, broad flags of it, pale gray, each one slightly uneven, worn smooth in the paths that feet had traveled most often. From the door to the counter, from the counter to the shelves, from the shelves to the back of the room, where the hearth and the oven held their long, patient vigil. The walls were whitewashed, or had been once. Now they were the color of old cream, warmed further by the amber light of the fire into something closer to honey. Shelves ran along the near wall, wide wooden shelves, their edges dark with age, holding loaves in various states of completion. Some were fully baked and resting, their crusts the deep, satisfying brown of something that has met heat and been made better by it. Others were pale and domed and still, swelling slowly inside their tins in the warmth, alive with the slow breath of rising yeast. Everything was quiet, not an empty quiet, not the quiet of absence. This was a full quiet, a quiet with texture and weight, the kind of quiet that exists inside a place where work is being done slowly and well, where no one is hurrying, where time has agreed to move at a different pace than it does outside. The sounds that existed were only the sounds of the room itself. The platform clock is the large one, the one mounted high on the wall above the timetable boards, its face perhaps 2 feet across, its numerals Roman, its minute hand moving in the particular way of station clocks, whose movements are wound to the same specification as the trains they serve. A precise, measured beat, exactly 1 second apart. Each advance of the second hand, a small, clean click that can be heard at some distance in a quiet station. He winds it from a ladder that he places against the wall with the same care with which he does everything. 7 turns. He descends, looks up at the clock face, adjusts his own pocket watch against it, the small silver one that lives in his waistcoat, which he has carried for many years, and which keeps, he has mentioned, rather better time than it has any right to given its age. There is a fraction of a second between them, perhaps. He notes this with a small nod and adjusts nothing, because a fraction of a second between a pocket watch and a station clock is not a problem. It is simply the difference between 2 instruments that are both doing their best. At mid-morning, between the winding of the last clock and the brewing of midday tea, he feeds the cats. There are 3 of them you have established, a large tabby of indefinite age and unshakable dignity, who lives primarily in the luggage room and has an arrangement with the trunks that suits all parties. A younger tortoiseshell who prefers the engine yard and is often found sitting on the warm brick of the shed walls in the late morning sun, and a small, entirely black cat of unknown provenance who arrived one November several years ago and has never left, and who resides mostly in the first-class waiting room on the green velvet bench nearest the window. He carries the food in a small tin, warmed slightly on the stove, not hot, just the edge off the cold, because it is his view that cats, like travelers, deserve a meal that has been thoughtfully prepared. The tabby appears from behind a trunk the moment the tin is opened, its manner combining urgent interest with a studied attempt at nonchalance. The tortoiseshell must be fetched from the yard, or rather, informed. which consists of the porter standing at the yard door for a moment and saying, quietly, "Mid-morning," as though issuing a gentle reminder of an appointment, after which the cat descends from its wall and arrives in its own time. The black cat is already in the waiting room when you reach it. It is sitting upright on the green velvet in the posture of something that has been informed of nothing and has arrived entirely of its own accord, by coincidence, and would appreciate it if you did not suggest otherwise. The porter sets down the 3 portions on their saucers without comment. He watches them eat for a moment with the expression he reserves for things done well. A quiet, settled satisfaction. Not proud exactly, but pleased in the way that one is pleased by the correct functioning of a system that has been designed with care. Midday tea is made with the same attention as every other thing. The water is brought to the full boil and not a moment past it. He listens to it, the pot on the range, hearing the moment the boil becomes a full rolling boil by its sound alone, lifting the pot at precisely that moment with a cloth around the handle, and carrying it to the teapot, which has been warmed with a small quantity of water, swirled and emptied beforehand. The tea, loose measured in the small silver spoon he keeps for exactly this purpose, is allowed to steep for 4 minutes. Not 3, not 5. He watches the platform while it steeps. You stand beside him at the window, the 2 of you looking out along the length of the platform as the midday train comes in. It comes in slowly, as all trains come in here. This station is not a fast station, not a rushing through station, but a considered one. A station where arrivals are taken seriously. The engine rounds the gentle curve at the platform's far end with a long descending sigh of steam, its wheels already slow, the great driving rods completing their circles with a stately deliberation that is, in its way, beautiful. The carriages follow, swaying very slightly as the speed falls, their windows passing like a sequence of lit rooms. A face here, a hand on a window there. Someone reaching for a bag on the overhead shelf, someone leaning back with eyes closed, already somewhere else in their thoughts. The train stops, the platform receives it. A handful of passengers descend, and a handful board, and there is a brief, ordinary bustle of the kind, thousands of times a day, at thousands of stations across the country, without anyone marking it as remarkable, which is perhaps the best evidence of how remarkable it is. An engine and its carriages and its fuel and its crew and its timetable all converging at exactly this point, at exactly this hour, day after day, the whole enormous, intricate system of it functioning so reliably that the people stepping on and off do so without looking up, without marveling, without once considering what it required to make this ordinary moment possible. The porter watches all of it. He watches it the way he winds the clocks and polishes the handles and writes the ledger entries and feeds the cats with full attention, without urgency, finding in the watching what he has always found in every task that is done completely and without remainder. The train departs. The platform is quiet again. Tea should be ready, he says, and you go in. The station breathed differently after midnight. It was Emiliano who suggested the walk, not the young porter who scurried about with luggage carts and apologies, but the older one, the one with the silver-threaded mustache and the unhurried way of moving, as though he had long since made peace with time. He had found the traveler sitting alone on a bench near platform 3, coat folded across the lap, eyes fixed on nothing in particular. A quiet person recognizes another quiet person. Without ceremony, Emiliano had said only, "Come." The tracks are worth seeing at this hour. And somehow, without question, the traveler had risen and followed. They passed through a low iron gate at the far end of the platform, the hinges sighing like something half asleep, and stepped out into the open space behind the station where the world fell away into a long corridor of shadow and silver. The tracks ran ahead of them in twin lines, curving gently out of sight toward the eastern hills. At this hour, they had stopped being instruments of industry and become something else entirely, something lunar, almost devotional. The rails caught the starlight along their polished upper edges and held it so that two unbroken rivers of soft luminescence stretched into the dark, parallel and patient, as though the sky had simply decided to lie down and rest a while upon the earth. The traveler slowed without meaning to, arrested by it. "I never get used to it," Emiliano said, noticing. 22 years, and I still stop here most nights to look." The gravel underfoot gave a small, muffled crunch with each step, a sound like the settling of a house, like the turning of pages in an empty library. It was cool out, but gently so, the kind of cool that does not demand anything of you, that simply rests against the skin the way a grandmother's hand rests against a forehead. The traveler pulled the coat on properly and felt, with some surprise, deeply comfortable. Far down the yard, 3 or 4 trains stood in their sidings, dark and enormous. They were not sleeping exactly. Machines do not sleep, but they had assumed something like the posture of sleep, still, massed, their breath held. Occasionally, a soft metallic sound drifted up from their direction, a tick or a groan of cooling metal, and the night absorbed it easily, the way still water absorbs a stone. The traveler thought about all the miles those trains had traveled that day, all the windows through which the countryside had poured like a film, unreeling, all the faces momentarily illuminated in their glass reflections. And now this perfect cessation. The station building itself glowed amber behind them. A single lamp on platform 1 swept its yellow circle back and forth in a slow arc, moved by nothing visible, or perhaps by the gentlest of breezes. It caught the edge of a baggage cart, the corner of a sign, the back of a bench, and released each in turn, and the traveler watched it for a long time, hypnotized, the way one watches the beam of a lighthouse from a hillside, not for any practical reason, but because something in the rhythmic sweep answers something rhythmic inside the chest. "Do you think about them?" the traveler asked eventually. "The people who pass through." Emiliano considered the question without hurry. They had stopped walking by some mutual unspoken agreement and were standing side by side between the rails, which was perhaps not strictly permitted, but felt, at this hour, entirely reasonable. "Every day," he said, "and at night, too, sometimes, but not in a sad way. More like, you know how a river thinks about its water? It doesn't mourn the water that has passed. It is simply made of passing." The traveler turned this over. "I used to want to hold on to things," the traveler said. "Moments, places. I thought if I held tightly enough, they wouldn't go. And now?" A pause. Somewhere in the dark, a night bird called once and fell silent. Now I think the holding was the problem. I was so busy clutching the moment that I couldn't feel it. Emiliano made a small sound of agreement, warm and unperforming. He reached into his breast pocket and produced 2 wrapped sweets, the kind sold at the station kiosk, hard candies in crinkled paper, and offered one without comment. The traveler accepted it. They unwrapped them in companionable quiet, the paper crinkling loudly and absurdly in the stillness, and both of them smiled at the sound. They walked on. The gravel gave way briefly to packed earth, then back to gravel again, each texture speaking its own particular word beneath the feet. The stars above were extraordinary, this far from the main platforms. Away from even the station's modest light, they arrived in multitudes, crowded and careless, spilled like sugar across a dark cloth. The traveler tipped the head back and felt the familiar ancient sensation. Smallness without sadness, the loosening of something knotted behind the sternum. I used to think, Emiliano said, that the purpose of travel was the destination. That all this, the waiting, the passing through, was simply the price you paid. And now? He gestured unhurriedly at the space around them, at the rails holding their stolen starlight, at the distant amber glow of the station, at the gravel, the cool air, the resting trains, the lamplight making its patient revolutions. Now I think this is the destination, he said. All of it, every between place, every in-between hour. The traveler felt something shift, quietly and without drama, the way a door that has been stuck for a long season finally swings open on a warm day, not with any great force, just with ease and a sense of having always been about to. Gratitude arrived in the way it sometimes does at night, not as a thought, but as a sensation, warm and spreading, beginning somewhere below the ribs and moving upward. Gratitude for this walk, unplanned and unscheduled, for the porter who had simply said come and meant it, for the rails and their light-keeping, for the night bird, for the candy wrapper's crinkle, for the specific cool of this specific air, for being here at all, in this between place, in this between hour. They turned back eventually, neither of them announcing the decision. The station drew them gently, its amber windows like the windows of a house one has lived in for a long time and loves without always noticing. The lamp was still sweeping its slow arc across Platform 1. A night train was being readied somewhere in the distance. The traveler could hear the first stirrings, the low, purposeful sounds of something large, remembering its function. At the gate, Emiliano held it open, and the hinges sighed again. "Thank you," the traveler said. It was not enough, and was exactly enough. The old porter smiled, not the professional smile he deployed for passengers with questions and complaints, but a smaller, quieter one, worn only in certain hours. "Sleep well," he said. "The morning trains are kind ones." The traveler walked back through the station, past the dozing ticket windows, the dark kiosk, the benches where strangers had sat and would sit again, and found the small room beyond Platform 4 that had been arranged for the night. The sheets were cool and plain. The window looked out on the yard, and there, just visible from the pillow, the two rails still ran their quiet course into the dark, still holding what starlight they had been given, steady and unhurried, going nowhere and everywhere at once. The traveler closed both eyes, and for perhaps the first time in a very long journey, felt no need to be anywhere else. Outside, the lamp went on sweeping. The gravel settled. The trains breathed their slow, metallic breath, and the night held everything gently, the way it always does, like cupped hands full of water, careful not to spill. It happened just before the first light, that particular shade of dark that is not quite night anymore, when the sky turns from black to a deep, exhausted blue, and the stars don't vanish so much as recede, politely, as though stepping back to allow someone else through. The traveler had not slept so much as drifted, the way you drift in shallow water, aware of the surface but untroubled by it, and had woken, if waking was the right word, to find the window full of that blue and the yard outside very still, and a feeling of unusual clarity sitting quietly in the chest like a warm stone. Emiliano was waiting in the corridor, not waiting in any urgent sense. He was simply there, the way certain things are simply there in the early morning. A cup already filled, a door already open, as though they had been arranged by some gentle and attentive intelligence that asks nothing in return. He had his uniform coat on, but the brass buttons were not all fastened, and his cap was tucked under his arm rather than worn, which gave him the look of a man between roles, belonging more to the morning than to the station. In his other hand he held something small. He did not draw attention to it. "You are leaving on the 7:15?" he said. It was not a question. "I am." He nodded, and they stood for a moment in the particular companionship that had grown between them, not long enough to have history, but deep enough, somehow, to have trust. The corridor was quiet. Somewhere below, the station was beginning its first tentative stirrings. A trolley wheel, a distant door, the low exchange of voices from the platform staff arriving for the early shift. But up here, not yet, up here, there was still a margin of stillness, and they were standing in it together. The traveler took it. It was lighter than expected, lighter almost than it had any right to be, as though it were more idea than object, and warm. Not the warmth of a hand that has recently held it, but its own warmth, interior and constant, like a coal that has been banked for a long night and still holds the memory of its fire. The luminescence moved again, and the traveler felt something answer it, a settling, a quieting, the sensation of a compass needle finding north. "I don't know what I meant to do with it," the traveler said. "Nothing," said Emiliano. "You're not meant to do anything with it. It isn't a tool." He seemed to consider for a moment how to say the next thing. When you're on the train and you can't remember what you're traveling toward, when you arrive somewhere new and the newness feels like too much, when the night is very long and you've lost the thread, he tilted his head gently. "Hold it, that's all. Just hold it and let it remind you." "Remind me of what?" He smiled. "The small private one, the one that wasn't for passengers. That you already know the way." The traveler closed the fingers around the vial and stood with it for a moment, out the window at the end of the corridor. The sky had shifted to a deep rose along the horizon's edge, and the rails below had caught it and were holding it, those faithful keepers of light, already preparing for the day's first reflections. A pigeon landed on the platform railing, looked around with the brisk authority of a bird that has places to be, and flew off again. Somewhere in the station's belly, the first proper sounds of morning were gathering themselves. "You've given things like this before," the traveler said. It was not entirely a guess. Even out here in the rain-damp air of the lane, something reached you, faint but unmistakable. Old paper, dry wood, a thread of something warm and spiced, like tea steeped long and strong. Beeswax, perhaps, the faint ghost of pipe tobacco, though there was none burning now. It was the smell of a place that had been inhabited quietly and contentedly for a very long time. You pushed open the door. A small bell rang above your head. Not a sharp ring, but a soft, round tone. The kind a bell makes when it is old and has been rung 10,000 times and has worn its own edges smooth. The sound hung in the air for a moment and then dissolved into the hush of the shop. The warmth met you immediately. It was the warmth of a room that has been warm for a very long time. Deep and settled, rising from the floorboards and radiating from the walls, from the books themselves, as though all those pages had absorbed decades of firelight and were giving it gently back. You stood in the doorway for a moment, letting it reach you. The shop was small, but it did not feel cramped. It felt, and this was the only word for it, complete, as though nothing were missing. The shelves rose from floor to ceiling on every wall, packed with volumes of every size. A wooden ladder on a brass rail stood to one side, angled up toward the higher shelves, patient and ready. A low table near the fire held a stack of books in mid-arrangement, as though someone had paused their work only moments ago. A Persian rug in faded reds and golds covered the floor between the shelves. 2 chairs, wide, cushioned, well-used, sat on either side of the hearth, and behind a low counter at the far end of the shop, half lit by the lamp at his elbow, stood the keeper. He was an elderly man, spare and upright, with silver hair that had gone somewhat soft at the temples and a pair of round spectacles perched low on his nose. He wore a dark waistcoat over a white shirt, the sleeves rolled to the elbow in the manner of someone who had been working quietly and without fuss. And there was a pencil tucked behind one ear, his hands resting on the open ledger before him were the hands of a man who had spent a great many years in the company of books. Careful hands, unhurried hands, with ink faint at the fingertips. He looked up at the sound of the bell. His eyes, behind the spectacles, were dark and warm and quietly glad. "Good evening," he said. His voice was low and even, unhurried as the river you had passed on the road. "Come in out of the wet. You found us just in time." You stepped fully inside, and the door swung gently closed behind you. The bell sounded once more, softer now, like an afterthought. "I wasn't sure I'd find anywhere open," you said, glancing around at the shelves, at the lamp, at the steady small fire. "The town seems to be settling in for the evening." "It does that," the old man said, and there was the faintest trace of a smile at the corner of his mouth. Netherton-on-Fell is not a town that keeps late hours, but I find I am always here. 1 or 2 people always seem to need a book at unexpected times. He closed the ledger with a soft sound. "I am Forsyth, Edmund Forsyth. Welcome to Ember Lane." You moved slowly into the shop, the Persian rug soft underfoot, the lamplight catching the gilded spines of the nearest shelf. Everything had the quality of something preserved, not frozen, but held, the way a pressed flower is held between pages, still itself and yet made gentle by time. There were globes on a high shelf, one of them quite old with coastlines you didn't quite recognize. There were ink bottles, stoppered with cork, and a wooden tray of old quills. There were framed maps on the one stretch of wall not occupied by shelves. A map of a coastline, a map of a mountain range, a map drawn by hand with compass roses in each corner and small handwritten notes in the margins. It felt like a room outside of time, not in a strange way, not in a way that unsettled. Quite the opposite. It felt as though the ordinary rush of hours and years simply did not reach this far down Ember Lane, as though whatever urgency existed in the wider world had agreed by some unspoken arrangement to wait outside the door. "Do you travel far, mister?" Forsyth asked. He had come out from behind the counter now and was standing by the fire, his hands clasped lightly at his back, regarding you with quiet interest. "Far enough," you said. Today has been a long one." He nodded, as though this explained a great deal. "Then you'll want to sit for a moment. There's no hurry, not tonight. The rain doesn't seem inclined to stop, and the fire is in no danger of going out." He gestured to one of the chairs by the hearth, the left one which was slightly more worn than the other, its cushion shaped by long acquaintance. "Sit. I'll put the kettle on." You sat. The chair received you with the particular generosity of old furniture that has known many people and harbors no judgment. The fire was low and even, its coals glowing a deep orange red. Above the mantel, a clock ticked, slowly, patiently, though you found you could not quite read the time. The hands seemed to rest somewhere comfortable and approximate. From somewhere behind the shelves, you heard the quiet sound of water beginning to heat, the tap of a cupboard, the small companionable sounds of a kettle being made ready. The rain tapped at the window in its own soft rhythm. The fire settled with a gentle creak. Somewhere, deep in the shelves, a draft turned a page of an open book with a sound like a whispered word, and you felt, for the first time in a long while, that there was nowhere else you needed to be. The shop breathed around you. The books held their quiet. The lamp burned on the table without flicker or fuss. And somewhere in the warm, paper-scented air of that old place, the long tiredness of the day began very slowly to soften. The way frost softens when brought indoors, without drama, without effort, simply by being somewhere warm at last. Mr. Forsyth reappeared in the gap between two shelves, carrying a small tray. "Chamomile," he said, setting the tray on the low table between the chairs. "With a little honey, if you'd like it. I find it suits the evening." Steam curled upward from the two white cups in long, slow spirals, catching the lamplight, rising and dissolving and rising again. You reached for the cup. It was warm in both hands. Outside, on Ember Lane, the rain fell on. The gas lamps burned their steady gold. And the night, which had been waiting at a patient distance, moved a little closer, gently, without alarm, and settled itself around the small, warm light of the bookshop, like a cloak. Part 2. Inside the bookshop. The fire was the heart of it all. It burned in a low iron grate, set into the far wall, beneath a mantel of dark wood on which rested a carriage clock, 2 brass candlesticks, and a small earthenware pot of dried lavender that had long since lost its scent but kept its shape perfectly. The coals glowed in slow shifting colors, deep orange, then amber, then a brief bright red where the air reached them, and above them a few small flames moved without urgency, bending and straightening like something quietly breathing. You sat in the left-hand chair and watched the fire and said nothing for a while. There was no need to say anything. Mr. Forsyth had settled into the chair opposite, his cup held in both hands, his spectacles pushed up slightly on his nose, his eyes resting on some middle distance between the fire and the bookshelves. He had the quality, you noticed, of someone entirely at ease with silence. Not a heavy silence, not an awkward one, but the kind that belonged to a room the way the furniture did. Natural, unhurried, simply there. You let your gaze move slowly around the shop. The shelves were extraordinary. They rose from floor to ceiling on every available wall, built of dark oak that had deepened over the years to something almost black at the edges, the grain of the wood visible where the polish had worn thin. The shelves themselves bowed slightly in the middle, not dangerously, but gently, with the comfortable sag of something that has carried a great weight for a very long time and made peace with it. The books were packed in tightly, their spines outward. And what spines they were! Leather, dark green, burgundy, deep brown, black, cracked along the hinges, and soft at the corners. Cloth covers in faded blues and dusty reds. Gilt lettering that caught the firelight when you turned your head just so, throwing up brief flashes of gold from titles half legible with age. Some volumes were fat and imposing. Others were slim as a finger, their titles pressed in tiny, careful letters. A few had no titles at all on their spines, only the suggestion of one worn away to a ghost. Between the books, here and there the keeper had placed small objects, a folded fan of ivory and silk, a magnifying glass in a leather case, a compass with a cracked crystal face, its needle still swinging slowly north, a tiny ceramic figure of a sleeping cat. These objects had the air of things that had arrived in the shop by various routes and simply never left, absorbed into the shelves the way driftwood is absorbed into a riverbank. The ladders were a particular delight. There were two of them, tall, narrow, built of the same dark wood as the shelves, their rungs worn smooth and slightly shiny from long use. They hung from brass rails that ran the length of the two longest walls, fitted with small brass wheels so that they could be slid from one end to the other with a push. One of them stood at a slight angle near the far corner, as though someone had climbed it recently and left it there without quite meaning to. The other rested against the section of shelving nearest to you, and, looking up along its length, you could see that the top rungs disappeared into shadow, the highest shelves lost in the dimness above the lamplight. You wondered what was up there, what titles waited in the dark, what had been placed on the topmost shelves and perhaps not touched in years, decades even, settling quietly into the particular stillness of things that are no longer looked for. "The upper shelves," said Mr. Forsyth, as though reading your gaze, "are for the books that have found their permanent home. They are not for sale. They simply belong here." He said this without apology or explanation, as though it were the most natural arrangement in the world. Quite. Some coastlines curved where you expected them to be straight. Some seas bore names you had never encountered. The second globe was smaller and showed not the earth but the heavens, constellations picked out in faded gold against a dark ground, the figures of the old star patterns drawn in delicate lines between them. Orion with his belt, the bear, the twins, the names written in Latin, worn to near illegibility but still faintly present. The third and smallest globe sat in a wooden cup and appeared to be purely decorative, a sphere of pale blue glass with a single silver continent visible, abstract and dreaming, like a world seen from very far away. On the counter beside the ledger, the ink bottles, a row of them varying in size, stoppered with cork or fitted with tiny glass lids. Some were almost empty, their contents reduced to a dark residue at the bottom. Others were full, deep black or a dark sepia brown, or in one case, a rich midnight blue that caught the lamplight in a way that made you want to pick up the nearest quill and simply make a mark. Any mark? Just to use it. The quills lay in a flat wooden tray beside the bottles, half a dozen of them, their nibs cut at different angles, their feathers varying from plain gray to a pale cream. One had been recently used. Its nib was still dark, and a small curl of dried ink marked the edge of the tray where it had rested. "Do you still write by hand?" you asked. "Always," said Mr. Forsyth simply. "A pen moves at the right pace for thought. A typewriter hurries one along. And as for the other devices, he made a mild gesture with one hand that suggested the entire modern world. They seemed to me to move rather faster than the things worth saying. He rose then quietly and crossed to a small alcove set into the wall beside the counter. A recess you had not noticed before, half hidden behind a curtain of dark green velvet that had been drawn aside. Inside the alcove was a spirit stove, a small tie. "I thought perhaps Coco," Mr. Forsyth said, more to himself than to you. "The evening seems to call for it." His movements were deliberate and practiced, measuring the powder, setting the small pot to heat, stirring with a long-handled spoon in slow circles. Steam rose from the pot in a thin column, catching the candlelight, curling upward, and dispersing into the warm air of the shop. The smell that began to reach you was extraordinary, deep and sweet and rich, with a thread of something almost smoky beneath it, like chocolate kept near a fire. He brought the cups on the same small tray as before, setting them on the low table between the chairs. The cocoa was dark and steaming, topped with a small amount of cream that was just beginning to melt into it in slow white spirals. You wrapped both hands around the cup. The warmth moved up through your palms. "Do you have many visitors?" you asked. After a while, "Enough," Mr. Forsyth said. "Not so many that the shop feels busy. Enough that it feels alive." He gazed into the fire. "There is a school teacher who comes on Thursday afternoons and spends an hour with the natural history section. A retired naval officer who buys maps, though I believe he no longer sails. A young woman who reads poetry standing at the shelves because she tells me it is different from reading it seated. She says the words move differently when you are on your feet." He smiled at this, briefly and warmly. "And then there are the unexpected ones," he said, "like yourself, people who find the lane by chance, or by necessity, or by something else entirely that doesn't quite have a name." The fire ticked softly. Somewhere in the shelves, a book shifted, the small sound of a volume settling against its neighbor, a sound like a sigh. "What draws people to books, do you think?" you asked. Mr. Forsyth considered this for a long moment, his head tilted slightly, his eyes moving slowly around the room, as though the answer might be visible somewhere among the shelves. "Company," he said at last. "I think it is most fundamentally company, the sense that someone else has thought carefully about something and set it down, and that you are welcome to follow along. It is," he paused, searching, "like finding a lamp left burning in a window. Someone has been here before you. Someone left a light." The rain outside had settled into a steady, gentle sound, not drumming, but a continuous soft, white noise hiss against the glass, punctuated occasionally by a deeper note when a drop found the window ledge or the iron bracket above the door. Inside, the fire burned on. The lamps held their amber pools of light. The books waited in their thousands on their shelves, patient and present, each one a voice that had once said, "Listen." You drank your cocoa slowly. The warmth spread from your hands to your arms, from your arms to your chest, from your chest outward to the edges of you, finding all the cold, tired places and attending to them, one by one, without fuss. And the shop held its breath around you, softly, the way a cupped hand holds a small warm thing, keeping the wind away. From somewhere deeper in the cottage, comes the small, clear sound of water being poured. You hear it clearly in the hush. The liquid sound of water filling a kettle, unhurried, the pitch rising gradually as the vessel fills, and then a soft metallic clink as the kettle is set upon the hob, and then the very faint, low sigh of heat beginning its slow work. The quilt maker returns to the workshop, drying their hands on the edge of their apron. "Chamomile?" they say, by way of explanation, and you nod, and that is the whole of the conversation about it. 3 syllables, entirely sufficient. They pull a second, smaller chair from beneath the nearer work table, a plain wooden chair with a cushion of faded blue tied to its seat, and place it beside your own, close to the fire, and sit down. With the slow, considered movement of someone who does not sit down carelessly, but attends to it, settling into stillness as deliberately as they settle into work. For a little while, neither of you speaks. The fire speaks for you. It crackles, a small, bright crackle, as a piece of wood shifts and releases its stored air in a tiny, quick burst, and then settles back into its low, steady conversation with itself. The sound of it is extraordinary when you attend to it closely. It is not one sound, but many, a continuous layered murmur of soft hisses and ticks and occasional deeper pops, the wood contracting and expanding and giving itself over slowly to the heat, and beneath all of that, the deeper, barely audible sound of the draw, the chimney, breathing the smoke upward into the cold dark above the cottage, patient and unhurried. The shadows move on the flagged stone floor, long, warm, amber shadows cast by the firelight, shifting gently as the flames rise and fall. They move across the floor and up the far wall and over the stacked bolts of fabric, and where they touch the silk, the light seems to sink into it and glow from within, as though the fabric itself were faintly, warmly lit. The ticking of the grandfather clock reaches you from the hallway beyond. It is steady, completely, absolutely steady, the kind of steadiness that is not merely mechanical, but feels almost intentional, almost kind. Tick, 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 low and resonant, each beat a small, contained sound that falls and is absorbed by the warm air of the room and replaced, without pause, by the next. You have heard clocks all your life, and yet this one, in this room, at this hour, seems to be doing something slightly different from what clocks usually do. It is not measuring the passage of time so much as it is anchoring it, holding the present moment open, spacious, unhurried, saying in its quiet, rhythmic way, "There is no rush. There is only now, tick, and now, tick, and now." The kettle begins, very faintly, to sing. Not a whistle, not yet, simply the first, barely there murmur of warming water, a sound so soft you might almost imagine it, a low and gentle hum that rises by degrees as the heat builds beneath it. You listen to it without effort, without intention, the way you listen to rain, simply aware of it, simply receiving it. As it rises and fills the quiet spaces between the ticking of the clock and the breathing of the fire, the quilt maker rises. Their footsteps move to the kitchen and back. You hear the small sounds, one after another, each one quiet and distinct and deeply familiar in the way that domestic sounds always are. The chime of a teapot lid lifted, the gentle clink of a cup placed on a saucer, the soft sound of liquid poured in a slow, steady stream. Then the carrying of it, the light, Careful. Footsteps returning, and the quilt maker is beside you again, placing the teacup gently into your hands. The cup is warm through the porcelain. Not hot, warm. Exactly, precisely warm. The warmth of something that will be kind to your hands and your throat and your chest. The tea inside is pale gold in the firelight, and from its surface rises a thin thread of steam curling slowly upward, dissipating into the warm air of the room. You bring it close and breathe before you drink. Chamomile, and beneath it, or perhaps woven through it, as threads are woven through cloth, the faintest suggestion of honey and something else, something you cannot quite name, something slightly sweet and green and ancient. You think, without quite knowing why, of open meadows in late summer, of long, slow afternoons, of drowsiness. You drink. Slowly. The scent of the room settles around you as you drink. It is the scent of lavender, that dried bunch above, releasing its quietest ghost of fragrance into the warm air. And the scent of beeswax from the candles on the mantelpiece, burning low and steady, and the deeper, older scent of the room itself, the cloth and the wooden beams, and the cold stone warmed by long years of fire. It is a scent that does not ask anything of you. It is simply present, like the warmth, like the ticking of the clock, like the amber light, a layer of comfort that you receive without effort, without decision. The quilt maker reaches into the nearer basket and draws out a long piece of navy flannel, spreading it across their lap with the quiet attention of someone examining something they know very well. This one needs finishing, they say. Not to you particularly, not requiring a reply. Simply observing. Their hands move to the small wooden workbox on the table beside them. A shallow box, its lid inlaid with a simple pattern of lighter wood, worn smooth, and lift from it a needle already threaded, laid to rest there at some earlier moment for just this purpose. They draw the needle through the fabric with the slowest, most fluid motion, pulling the thread through in one long, unhurried arc, and then back, and then through again. The sound of it is almost imperceptible. The faintest shush of thread through cloth, the tiniest whisper of resistance, and then release, over and over, in a rhythm as steady as breathing. You do not try to watch. You simply let your eyes rest on the firelight. The heavy cloth in the basket shifts faintly as the warmth from the fire stirs the air. The silk on the work table catches the light and holds it. From outside, very far away, softened almost to silence by the fog and the thick old walls, you hear the faint sound of the village settling into its evening. A door closing somewhere, a horse shifting in a stable yard, the distant sound of bells from the church tower tolling the hour in slow, resonant strokes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Each stroke fades completely before the next arrives. The silence between them is immense and soft. The quilt maker sews on, unhurried. The fire breathes. The clock ticks. The steam from your teacup rises and thins and disappears. The dried lavender above the beam releases its quiet scent into the warm air, and the beeswax candles burn without flickering, and the quilts on their shelves and their folded stacks glow softly in the amber light, each one a gathered warmth, a patient record of careful hands and slow hours, and love translated stitch by stitch into cloth. That was the only word for it. Breathed. The heat moved from it in slow, heavy waves, not pulsing quickly but rolling, the way deep water rolls, the way the tide moves, large, slow movements of warm air that reached the chair and the traveler in it and pressed gently, pressed and receded, and pressed again. Each wave arrived like a hand laid flat and warm against the face and held there briefly, and when it receded, it took something with it, some small remaining tension, some last held fragment of the cold night, and when the next wave came, there was less to take, and less and less. The eyelids grew heavy, not all at once. The weight came gradually, the way all the best things come, in increments too small to resist, each one reasonable on its own, accumulating without announcement into something large and gentle and irresistible. The amber light of the fire blurred softly at the edges. The sound of the baker's hands on the floured block moved further away, or seemed to, not disappearing, but becoming more like something dreamed than something heard, still present, still steady, still the faithful heartbeat of the room. The mug rested against the chest. Both hands still held it, but loosely now, cradling rather than gripping, the warmth passing between the pottery and the palms in a slow, undemanding exchange. The blanket was very heavy, not uncomfortably so, heavily in the way of something that wants to help, that is pressing down not to constrain, but to reassure, to say, you are here, you are held. There is no need to hold yourself. The wool was slightly rough against the chin where it had been drawn up, and that small roughness was itself a comfort, a texture, a realness, evidence of the solidity of the world just at the moment when the world was beginning very gently to become less solid. The fire crackled once, a single, soft note like a word spoken in a language that had no other words, only that one, and that one was enough. The traveler's eyes closed, not with effort, not with decision, simply closed. The way a flower closes in the evening, not because it must, not from duty or exhaustion, but because the light has changed and the time for opening has passed, and there is nothing left to do now but rest, quietly and completely. Inside the warmth, the baker worked on. Press, turn, fold. The oven breathed. The snow fell on the lane outside, soft and silent and endlessly patient, covering the world in white. Let the warmth hold you now. Your hands are warm. Your shoulders are still. There is nothing here that needs you to be awake. Then, after a moment, the deeper sound of water being poured, and a smell that threaded itself through the lavender and rose and damp earth already filling the room. The warm, bergamot-edged scent of Earl Grey, and beneath it, lighter and softer, the dry sweetness of chamomile. She came back through the curtain, carrying a tray with the careful, practiced ease of someone who had carried many trays across many evenings. On it sat a brown teapot with a small chip on its lid and a worn cozy pulled over it, 2 cups of mismatched china, a small jug of milk, and a dish holding 2 pieces of shortbread wrapped in a square of cloth. She set it on the low surface near the stove, a cast iron thing tucked into the corner of the room, small and dark and gently radiating a heat that reached you from several feet away, a heat that settled against your face and hands like a kindness. Earl Grey, she said, pouring, with chamomile dried from last summer's garden. It's good for evenings that have gone on a long time. She handed you your cup without asking how you took it. And somehow, it was exactly right. Warm in your hands, not too strong, with just enough milk to soften its color to something between amber and gold. You wrapped both hands around it and held it. The stove ticked and murmured to itself. From somewhere across the room, you located it now, standing between two shelves in the far corner, taller than the surrounding furniture. Its dark walnut case fitted with a cream-faced clock that moved its hands with a steady, measured patience. A grandfather clock marked the seconds, not loudly, just present, just keeping time in the way it had always done and would continue to do long after tonight. And then, just at the edge of hearing, came another sound. The first soft pattering of rain against the shop window. It came quietly, as autumn rain often does. Tentative at first, a few drops tapping against the old glass, then settling into a steady, rhythmic whisper that filled in behind all the other sounds of the room, like a harmony joining a melody already in progress. The candlelight caught the rivulets running down the window panes and turned them briefly gold before they reached the sill. The fog outside pressed closer. The street beyond it disappeared entirely. You had never felt less inclined to be anywhere else. "Do you know much about the language of flowers?" the florist asked after a while. She was settled into a low chair beside the stove, her cup in one hand, her gaze drifting across the room in the unfocused, comfortable way of someone entirely at ease in their surroundings. She did not look at you when she asked it, which made it easier to answer honestly, or simply to listen, which she seemed equally happy with. "Floriography," she said, turning the word over gently, as though it were a stone with a pleasant weight to it. The Victorians were very serious about it, very systematic. They had whole dictionaries of meaning, a flower for every feeling, a feeling for every flower. But I think the real truth of it is older and simpler than that. She reached out toward a small clay jug on the shelf nearest her chair, from which a sprig of dried lavender was protruding, and drew it out with 2 fingers, turning it slowly. "Lavender," she said. "Rest, calm, the easing of what has been held too tightly for too long." She set it on the arm of her chair very lightly. People have known that for a very long time. Not because they read it in a book, because they brought it inside on difficult evenings, and the room was better for it. She was quiet for a moment. The rain continued its soft work on the windows. The clock continued its patient counting. "The rose," she said then, glancing toward the nearest jug of them, the deep red ones, their petals beginning to relax and open fully in the warmth of the room. "Everyone says love, and it is love, yes, but more precisely, the full-blown rose, the one that is opened completely, that means something more restful than romantic love. It means I am not holding anything back from this moment. I am entirely here." She looked at you then, briefly, with something warm and unsentimental. That's a good state to be in for an evening. You looked at the roses. Their petals had indeed opened wide, wide and soft and completely unguarded, the way a hand opens when it finally lets something go. The candlelight moved over them slowly, finding each fold and shadow. "Chamomile," the florist continued, her voice dropping a little lower now, easy and unhurried as the rain, means patience, the willingness to wait for what comes next without gripping it. "And the dried herbs up there?" She gestured gently upward toward the hanging bundles, shifting in the warm air above you. "Rosemary is for remembrance, for the sweetness of things that were. Sage is for wisdom quietly held. Thyme, a small pause, a smaller smile. Time simply means that you are cheerful, which is a fine thing to be." You tilted your head back and looked at them again. The lavender and chamomile and sage and rosemary, swaying softly overhead, their shadows moving across the beams in long, slow arcs, an entire quiet language hanging above you in the warm dark, speaking in the only way it knew how, through scent, through stillness, through the patient offering of its dried and resting self. The stove crackled. The clock measured something. The rain softened further until it was less a sound than a sensation. The knowledge that outside was outside and inside was this warmth and candlelight and the scent of things that asked only to be breathed in slowly. The florist settled deeper into her chair. You settled deeper into yours. The tea was warm in your hands. Feel the warmth of the cup if you like, or set it down gently and let your hands rest open. The fire is small and steady. The rain knows exactly what it is doing. The lavender above you is doing its quiet, ancient work. You don't need to follow any of this closely. Let the words come the way rain comes, steadily, softly, without asking to be held. The florist is here. The candles are here. The roses have opened completely. You are entirely allowed to rest now. The blizzard came on quickly, the way the worst storms always do. 1 hour ago, the sky was merely gray and heavy and full of the particular anticipation that winter carries in its belly. And then the wind shifted. You felt it change against your face like a held breath finally released. And the snow began to fall. Not gently, not the soft, drifting flakes of greeting cards and nursery windows. This snow fell sideways. This snow fell with intention. Now the wind moves through the trees in great, rolling waves. You hear it before it reaches you. A low building moan rising up somewhere far off in the dark woods, growing and growing until it becomes a roar, shaking the pine branches overhead so that cascades of white powder fall from them like small cold curtains. You bow your head into it. You keep walking. There is a certain kind of peace that lives on the other side of effort, and your body has found it. A quiet, animal steadiness, a warmth that lives deep in your chest and your thighs, and the solid rhythm of your feet. The forest is not frightening. It is only large and old and indifferent in the way that all truly old things eventually become. The oaks and beeches and silent pines have seen 1,000 storms like this one, and they will see 1,000 more, and they hold their ground with a patience that is almost comforting. You are small beneath them, but you are not alone in your smallness. The wind gusts again, fierce and long, pressing against you like a great invisible hand. And then something changes. You stop walking. You lift your face into the storm. There, carried on the very edge of the freezing air, threading itself through the raw, cold smell of snow and pine bark and frozen earth. Something else. Something that should not be here in this white wilderness, and yet is. Something warm. Wood smoke. You breathe in again, slowly, carefully, as though the scent might be startled away. And yes, there it is, rich and dark and familiar, the unmistakable smell of good wood burning low in a deep hearth, oak, perhaps, or apple wood, carrying that faint sweetness that only real wood holds. Your chest loosens around it. Something in your shoulders, some tightness you had not noticed carrying, eases very slightly. And beneath the wood smoke, something else again. Something stranger and sweeter, golden and floral and ancient, the way a memory from childhood sometimes surfaces without warning from somewhere you had forgotten entirely. Honey, warm honey, and beeswax, and something faintly herbal beneath it. Lavender, perhaps, or dried thyme, the scent of a place that has been lived in gently and for a very long time. The scent of care. You turn toward it. The smell is faint, directional, carried on a brief lull between gusts. Your boots find their rhythm again, and you move through the trees, following nothing more solid than a scent, trusting the way animals trust, completely and without analysis. The forest thins slightly, and then, between two enormous snow-draped pines, you see it. A light, not cold light, not the blue-white light of moon on snow, or the sharp flicker of something uncertain. This light is amber, deep, rich, golden amber, the color of honey held up to the sun, the color of candle flame seen through thick old glass. It pulses very slightly, alive the way only firelight is truly alive, and it comes from two low, broad windows set into something dark and solid and immovable in the white, swirling chaos of the storm. You take 3 more steps. The cottage emerges from the snowfall the way certainties sometimes emerge from confusion, gradually and then all at once. It is a low, stout building, built from logs so thick and dark with age that they seem to have grown here rather than been placed. The roof is buried under 1.5 feet of snow, the eaves hanging low and heavy, and from the wide stone chimney at the far end, a column of pale wood smoke rises and is immediately torn sideways by the wind. Neat stacks of split firewood run the length of one wall, sheltered beneath a low wooden overhang, and even from here, you can see the reassuring abundance of it. Enough wood for many weeks of deep winter. Enough for a long, unhurried stay. The windows glow. You stand and look at them for a moment. Just a moment before walking forward. Through the thick, slightly wavy glass, the light shifts and breathes in that slow, irregular way that only a real fire makes, and the amber of it falls across the snow outside in warm pools that seem almost to push the darkness back. A shadow moves inside, slow, unhurried, someone crossing the room with the steady ease of a person at home in their own warmth. You walk to the door. It is a massive thing, heavy planked oak, iron hinged, with a handle worn smooth by generations of hands. You stand before it for one moment, the wind screaming now behind you, flinging needles of ice against the back of your neck, pressing at you as though trying to reclaim you for the cold. You lift the latch. The door opens on a breath of heat so immediate and complete that for a second you cannot move. Warm air pouring out to meet you, scented with wood smoke and honey, and something baking slowly, deeply, something sweet and starchy and impossibly comforting. The light washes over the snow at your feet in a wide golden fan. You step inside, you turn, and you close the door. The sound of it closing is the most satisfying sound you have heard in a very long time. A deep, resonant, final thud. The iron latch dropping home with a solid click that seems to echo for a moment in the sudden, extraordinary quiet. The storm, all that roaring, flinging, howling white chaos, is simply gone. Gone as though it never was. Gone as though the world on the other side of that thick old door is nothing more than a story you half remember from somewhere, its edges already beginning to soften. You stand very still. The warmth settles over you like a hand. From somewhere deeper in the cottage, a fire crackles, low and steady and completely unhurried. The amber light moves gently across old wooden walls and the low beamed ceiling. The cold is leaving your cheeks, your fingers, the tip of your nose, slowly, gradually, like ice at the edge of a warming stream. You are inside now. You are warm. Let your breathing slow. Part 2, the golden hearth. Stay here with me a little longer. Let the weight of your body settle further into the warmth. Notice how your breathing has already begun to slow. Just a little, just enough. Let it slow a little more. There is no rush inside these walls. Time moves differently here. It moves the way honey moves, thick and golden, and in no particular hurry to be anywhere at all. You are still standing just inside the door, and now, at last, you allow yourself to look. The room is not large. That is the first thing you understand about it, and the understanding is immediately, profoundly. It is the size of a room that can be fully known, a room without hidden distances or cold, unlit corners, a room that holds its warmth because it has been built with the specific intention of holding it. The ceiling is low, crossed by 3 great beams of dark timber, each one smoothed and burnished by decades of firelight and wood smoke, until they glow faintly amber along their lower edges. The walls are the same aged log as the exterior, fitted so closely together that no draft could find its way between them, and over the years, they have taken on a deep, warm color, the color of strong tea, of dark caramel, of the inside of something old and well-loved and completely at rest. The floor beneath your boots is wide planked oak, worn smooth and dark in the paths between furniture, lighter in the places less traveled. It is the floor of a room that has been lived in faithfully, and it creaks very softly, just once, beneath your first tentative step inward. But the fireplace. The fireplace commands the far wall entirely. It is a massive thing, built from river stone, rounded and gray, and fitted together with a precision that speaks of a craftsman who understood that a fireplace is not merely functional, but is the very soul of a room. The mantelpiece above it is a single slab of dark oak, broad as a man's outstretched arms, and along it sit a row of quiet objects. A few beeswax candles burn to soft, generous pools of wax. A dark glass jar holding a spray of dried lavender. A small wooden clock whose tick is so slow and steady it has long since merged with the silence. The firebox itself is enormous, deep-set and generous, and inside it, 3 great logs burn with the unhurried confidence of things that have been alight for many hours, and intend to remain so for many more. The flames are not frantic. They are tall and low at once, deep orange at their base, where the coals glow with that particular ferocious red that good dry hardwood makes, shifting upward through amber and pale gold to the faintest blue at their very tips, where the heat is so complete it becomes almost invisible. They move together in a slow, collaborative rhythm, leaning slightly, swaying, folding against one another, separating. Watching them is like watching something breathe. The heat that radiates from this fireplace is not the sharp, aggressive heat of something newly lit. It is a settled, heavy, ancient heat, the kind that has had time to sink into the stone and the mortar, and the floor itself, so that the warmth comes not only from the flames before you, but from the very room around you. It crosses the floorboards in long, invisible waves and finds you where you stand, pressing against your cold cheeks, your cold hands, the tip of your nose. You feel it on your eyelids. You feel it in your sternum, loosening something there that the cold had quietly tightened without your noticing. The air, you breathe it in now, slowly, all the way down. Beeswax, warm and golden and faintly sweet, not the sharp sweetness of sugar, but the deeper, rounder sweetness of something natural and old. The sweetness that lives inside a hive on a summer afternoon, concentrated now in the slow melt of the candles along the mantel. Beneath it, lavender, dry and herbal and clean. The lavender of high summer fields, pressed and preserved and released gently into winter air. And beneath that still, the wood smoke, which is not merely a smell but a feeling, a particular sense of rightness that some part of a human animal has carried for 10,000 years. The knowledge that fire means safety and warmth, and the end of the cold day's walking. And one thing more, something slow and starchy and sweet drifting from a door at the back of the room. Something baking. Something that does not need to be identified to be comforting. You have been standing very still. You become aware of this because something else in the room moves. The beekeeper rises from the chair beside the fire. You had not quite seen them at first. They were so settled into the room, so much a part of its warmth and its quiet, that your eyes had passed over them, the way eyes sometimes pass over things that belong perfectly to their surroundings. But now they unfold from the deep-backed wooden chair with the unhurried ease of someone who has never once felt the need to move at any pace other than their own. And they turn to face you. They are a sturdy figure, broad-shouldered and solid in the way of people who have spent their lives in physical and patient work. Not imposing, but present, with the kind of physical groundedness that communicates something calm and fundamental about a person before they have spoken a single word. They wear a thick knit sweater in a deep, natural cream color. Its pattern a simple, repeating cable worked into the wool with the easy confidence of something made by familiar hands over long winter evenings. The sleeves are pushed to the elbows. Their face is weathered in a kindly way, seamed at the eyes with years of outdoor expression. And when they look at you, when their eyes find yours across the quiet, amber-lit room, there is nothing in them but a simple, steady welcome. No surprise, no demand, no urgency, only welcome. "Come in then," the beekeeper says, and the voice is quiet, low, the kind of voice that a room absorbs without diminishing, the kind of voice that does not need to be louder because it is accustomed to being listened to. You've been out in that long enough. It is not a question. You take another step into the room, and then another, and the warmth of the fire reaches you fully now, pressing against the front of you in one long, slow, encompassing wave. You feel your shoulders drop. You did not know they were raised, and something in your jaw unclenches, releasing a tension you had been carrying since the snow began. Perhaps since long before that. The beekeeper crosses the room toward you. Their footsteps on the old oak floor are quiet, measured, each one deliberate without being heavy. They stop just before you and tilt their head very slightly, studying your snow-covered coat with the same calm assessment they might bring to reading the sky or examining a honeycomb for winter stores. "Here now," they say simply, and their hands, warm, work-worn, completely certain of themselves. Find the collar of your coat. There is something extraordinary about being helped out of a coat by someone who does it without hurry. The beekeeper lifts it from your shoulders slowly, and as it slides away, the last of the outside cold goes with it. The damp weight of snow-sodden wool, the residual bite of the wind trapped in the fibers, the heaviness of it all. You feel lighter. You feel the warmth reach places it could not reach before. The beekeeper turns and hangs the coat on a row of wooden pegs beside the door, settling it gently, patting it once, as though even wet and snow-heavy things deserve to be handled with consideration. They gesture, simply and without fuss, toward the fire. You move toward it. Of course you do. You sink into the chair that faces the hearth. A deep, wide chair, its cushions softened by years of use into shapes that seem almost to anticipate the particular relief of a tired body, and you feel the heat from the fireplace now, without any intermediary at all. It falls across your legs and your lap and your outstretched hands in a long, steady, golden pressure. The fire speaks quietly to itself. And now, as you listen, do not try to count the drops. Simply let them arrive. Let them accumulate the way they are accumulating against the glass, each one adding itself to the sound until the sound becomes less like individual drops and more like a continuous texture, a fabric of noise that is somehow both complex and deeply, deeply simple. There is the higher note of the rain striking the glass directly. There is the lower, rounder sound of it hitting the stone ledge of the windowsill. There is the rushing, channeled sound of it finding the drain pipe at the corner of the house and descending in a contained stream. That particular liquid murmur that is steadier and more musical than the rain itself. And beneath all of it, beneath and behind and inside all of it, the cobblestones of the square below are receiving the rain in the way that wet stone receives things, quietly, with a kind of deep absorption, darkening further, sending up the clean and ancient smell of wet London stone that rises even now through the gap in the curtains and mingles with the warmth of the room. But the fire needs attention. In the armchair, we are aware of it. The fire has burned low while the evening gathered itself outside. The coals are still warm, still holding a faint orange at their hearts. But the flame has gone, and the room has begun to feel it. Just at the edges, just enough. The air near the window is the first to cool. It seeps inward, slowly, respectfully, as though it does not wish to intrude. It is time to build the fire up properly. There is something deeply, almost ceremonially satisfying about this, about the act of attending to a fire on a rainy night. It is one of the oldest things a person can do, and the body knows it, even before the mind is caught up. There is a box of kindling on the hearth, thin, dry sticks of wood. Pine, perhaps, split very fine, the palest straw color where they were cut. They have been sitting beside the fire all day and are warm already, warm and dry in the particular way that makes them almost eager. Beside them, a small coal scuttle, and beside that, a brass box whose hinged lid opens on a supply of long matches, the proper kind, the Victorian kind, with a thick red head and a long pale stem of pine. The first match is taken out with care. It is held for a moment, just a moment, between two fingers, the cold, smooth stem of it, the dense little head. Then it is drawn along the side of the brass striker at the edge of the box, a single deliberate stroke, and the sound of it, that brief, decisive rasp, cuts cleanly through the sound of the rain, bright and sharp and immediate, a sound that belongs entirely to this single second and no other. And then the flame. It blooms at the tip of the match with a tiny, surprised hiss, a quick flare of orange and blue that steadies itself within a heartbeat into a small, composed, upright flame. It leans slightly in the draft from the chimney. It casts a circle of warm light no larger than a cupped hand, but that circle of light is enough to illuminate the underside of the mantelpiece, the small bronze stag, the face of the carriage clock. The clock reads 20 minutes past 9. The kindling is placed with patience, not hurriedly, not carelessly. 2 or 3 sticks at first, arranged loosely over the remaining coals, with enough space between them for the air to move freely. The match is lowered to the driest, finest pieces, and the flame touches them with a kind of gentleness. For a moment, nothing. His hair was white and combed, his hands steady and precise over the envelopes. He was sorting. Not quickly. There was no speed in what he did, only accuracy. He would take an envelope from the stack, hold it a moment, read the address with the attention of someone who genuinely cared where it was going, and then place it with soft finality into the correct pigeonhole behind him. The sound this made, the dry whisper of paper against wood, was repeated every few seconds, steadily, like the clicking of the clock on the mantelpiece above the fire. He looked up. His eyes behind the spectacles were a warm gray blue, the color of the sky on a morning when the weather cannot quite decide. They carried without effort the unmistakable expression of a person who is genuinely glad to see another person. "Ah," he said, just that, quietly, as if the traveler's arrival had been not unexpected, not exactly, but simply right, as if the evening had been waiting for this moment and was now settling into its proper shape. "You'll have come a long way," he said. It was not quite a question. "I have," said the traveler. The postmaster nodded, the way people nod when a thing confirms what they already suspected, and set down his envelope with the same careful deliberateness with which he had been handling all the others. "Well," he said, "you're here now, and somewhere in the warmth of that small room, in the amber light and the scent of old paper and the soft ticking of the clock and the muffled whispering of the ancient trees outside," the traveler felt, with a certainty as quiet and complete as the village itself, that this was entirely true. Here, and arrived, and safe. Outside, the mist deepened. The village of Whispering Gate settled into the long, gentle dark of a perfect evening, and the fire in the corner of the post office crackled once, softly, and burned on. Part 2. Inside the old post office, the postmaster moved the way water moves through a calm place, not slowly exactly, but without any of the small urgencies that most movement carries. No sharp turns, no sudden reaches, every gesture completed before the next one began, as if each motion were a sentence that deserved its own full stop before the next was started. He came around from behind the counter with a quietness that the old floorboards accommodated entirely. They did not creak beneath him, or if they did, it was a creak so familiar and so expected that it had long since become part of the room's natural breath, as unremarkable as the ticking of the clock or the low voice of the fire. "Come in properly," he said. "Close the door behind you. The village air is lovely, but it has a way of following you in if you let it linger." The traveler closed the door. The latch settled into its housing with a sound like a word said quietly at the end of a long sentence, a sound of completion, of closure, of there. The room was even warmer now that the door was shut. The warmth was not the aggressive warmth of a room overheated, but the patient warmth of a space that had been tended carefully over many hours, built up gradually from the fireplace in the corner until it had reached this precise enveloping temperature, the temperature the traveler thought of a room that has been lived in with intention. The shelves, seen properly now, were extraordinary. They ran from floor to ceiling along the back wall and the wall to the right of the door, broken only by the counter and the fireplace, and two narrow windows whose glass had the old, slightly wavy quality that made the lamplight inside look liquid. The shelves were oak, dark oak, aged to the color of strong tea, and upon them, in an order that was immediately legible even if its exact logic was not, rested the accumulated correspondence and materials of a very long operation.